Welcome to Podfic galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldskythe. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion / Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from Archive of Our Own called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show. And now each night I count the stars. Chapter 19. Grief was a funny thing. At times it walked gently beside Halbarad, a constant companion, pacing in his shadow, almost a comfort. And others it would rise up, growling, seize his spirit between his teeth, and give him a good shake. He had spent a year in its company, though, and he fancied he knew its ways. And while he thought it would never quite leave him, it had, maybe, begun to sheath its claws. Hope, he soon found, hope and uncertainty were harsher masters. He had none until a week ago. After he lost his blackbird, he found it hard to sleep, and had thrown himself into his duties, sleeping only when he was certain he would be too weary for dreams. Dreams were cruel, and plagued him with dark and contradictory visions of Maklor's fate. He imagined every mischance that would befall someone on the road, every hazard of a restless world. It seemed hard to credit that someone who had lived as long as Maklor should now fall to something as simple as a mischance in the mountains or highwaymen, as though his mind turned to the things that frightened him more, chewing over and over images of Maklor fighting a fearsome enemy, fighting and falling, without Halbarad at his side. It was hard to say whether these tormented him more, or whether it was simple dreams that could easily have been true if only they lived together in a kinder world. Dreams of things they had had before Maklor had been summoned away. Of fires and stars and hands holding tight. There was one dream he had not had in all that time, and it had been this, more than anything else, that made him believe that Maklor was indeed gone. He had not dreamed of his death, not once, and in all of his other dreams Maklor was silent. It filled him with a sharp ache to think that the dream was gone. His other dreams changed, the song taken from him because the singer was gone. It had become his life, though, and something that he was beginning to believe that he could bear, until a week before. He had walked until his legs were shaking, on his way to encampment near Fornost, and had fallen asleep among the spring of flowers of a maple grove, and he had dreamed. The dream had smelled of foresight. He rode, as ever, singing to battle, and he was not alone, for Maklor rode beside him with flames pouring from his throat, and when he looked upon Halbarad, he had smiled. When Halbarad woke, he lay still for a long time, blinking at the small cluster of bloodroot flowers that grew beside the cloak that was his pillow, their 8-petaled flowers as bright as stars in a grey morning. It was a lie. It had to have been. Perhaps it was an echo of the dreams he had had already. Perhaps he had invented that cold breath of truth that always accompanied dreams of foresight. The future he saw in that dream could not be, for Maklor had died, fallen unremarked in some distant land. Unless. It was the unless that tormented him, the thought that he had been wrong, that he should not have accepted the words of comfort, of certainty. The thought that Maklor still lived, but had been unable to return to him, sat in his guts like a stone. The other thought, that Maklor still lived, but had been unwilling to return to him, well, that thought was hard to bear, but Halbarad was steadfast, and if it proved to be the case, then he would shoulder the grief of the knowledge happily, if only Maklor lived. He walked on, afraid to sleep, staring instead at the stars, at the fire to keep himself awake. It did not work, though, for he would doze and Maklor would look at him from across the fire and tell him it was time to leave. He did not sleep again until he came to Bree. His feet had carried him so far eastward almost without his thought, and he knew that he meant to walk on, to Rivendell, to the mountains, to Isengard and beyond if he must. He would wait no longer, heed no longer the words of comfort, of restraint. He would leave the duty that held him here, and maybe terrible things would happen because of it, but he would go mad if he remained. He was almost stumbling with weariness as he stepped over the threshold of the prancing pony's common room. The crowd seemed overloud that night, so he took his tankard to a corner with a vague notion that if he could only stay awake long enough to get well and truly drunk, then perhaps he would not dream. It had been a good plan, perhaps, and he was making steady progress towards his goal when his solitude was interrupted. A figure stopped in front of him, blocking the light. Halvard couldn't say whether it was weariness or drink that made it so hard to lift his eyes to see his face. Once he did, he was out of his seat in an instant, almost swaying into his arms. Aragorn looked much the same as he always had, even if his eyes seemed to sit a little bit deeper and his hair sported a bit more grey at the temples. He clasped at Halvard's forearms as if to steady him, and then pulled him into a rough hug. "Ah, it's good to see you," Aragorn said, as he broke away and sat beside Halvard. "And you. Everyone will tell you that I'm a poor substitute." He could have wept with relief, with worry that his planned desertion had maybe been snatched away, with sudden wild hope that one overdue return might herald another. "I don't think that is what they will say." Halvard waved that comfort away. "Tell me, quick, what of you? Where have you been? Did you find it?" Aragorn snorted a small wry smile at his lips. "I will tell you more, but yes, I found him, creeping about the marshes near the mountains of Shadow." He pulled up a sleeve and showed Halvard the mostly healed marks of bites from something with man-shaped mouth. "I quickly wished I hadn't," he commented, pulling the sleeve back down. "He's poor company. I left him in the keeping of the elves of the Greenwood. Gandalf is still trying to speak with him." Halvard shook his head and glanced around. "I want the whole tale, but not here." "No," Aragorn agreed, and took out his pipe. If he was trying to hide his scrutiny, he was doing a poor job of it. His brow furrowed, evidently unhappy with what he saw. "One of you, though, you look—" he interrupted himself. "When did you last sleep? Or bathe?" "Straight out the Rangers telling me to bathe now? Have I misremembered the story of the time Illidan tossed you in the Brandywine because he got tired of the smell?" He tried to laugh, but it came out bitter and he looked away. "Take it as a proof of my concern," said Aragorn, striking a light. "Come, it seems I'm not the only one with a tale. What has happened while I've been away?" Halvard told him. It had been a hard winter, yes, and before that a hard summer and fall. The orcs that lingered in Angmar had been active, coming out frequently to harry their camps and outposts. However much Halvard might have wished to, he could not have left his post earlier. The spring had brought a calming, the orcs seeming discouraged, or perhaps distracted, at least for the time being. They had lost many that year, their numbers dwindling further. All this he dutifully reported, watching as each reported loss dragged Aragorn's shoulders down. He could not bring himself to say anything about Magor. When he was finished, Aragorn looked at him for a long time. "That is not the whole story, is it? None of this quite explains why you are here, alone, drinking as if you wish to drown. Where has your shadow gone?" Halvard closed his eyes and shook his head. "I don't know," he said. Forgive me, I cannot stay in the north. I was leaving my duties. I'm sorry, but I must find him." He pulled out that last letter, by now much creased. "Here." Aragorn read, while Halvard hastened to explain. "The wizard says he never came to Isengard, and the sons of Elrond, they have found his harp. They think he's dead. They all say that he's dead, or they say that he has left me." Halvard could hear the frenzy that had crept into his voice, but he did not stop. "But he's not dead, Aragorn. He is not. I must go to him." "My friend, this letter, it is more than a year old. Surely, by now, if he has not—" "He's not dead!" The party of dwarfs at the table nearby looked over at them, startled by his outburst, then made a great show of returning to their business. Halvard forced himself back to his seat, not quite certain when he had stood. "Come." Aragorn stood with him. "Let us get some air." Halvard obeyed and followed him out to the street, where the air was cool and the stars bright. It was easier to think here than in the crowded inn. They walked in silence for a bit until they found a seat beneath the walls of the town. Halvard dropped heavily onto the wooden bench, waiting for the world to stop moving. "It sounds like you've had a hard year," said Aragorn carefully. I know it's never easy to lose a comrade. Halbarad had heard this speech before, and he couldn't stop the laugh that burst out, sharp and bitter. It seemed to worry Aragorn even more than his outburst in the pony. You knobhead, he gasped when he could speak. Do you think I do not know this speech by now? Do you think I have not given it many times over? Do not give me the comrades in arms speech. Maklar was not my friend. Halbarad shook his head, because that wasn't right either. He was not only my friend. Aragorn began, and paused. What was he to you? When Halbarad spoke, it was with a ferocity that surprised him. Where's your speech for someone who has lost the one they love, Aragorn? That's the one I need to hear. I am sorry, Halbarad. I did not know. Halbarad did not like the way Aragorn watched him. Too cautious. I did not know that you loved, well, that way. Does it matter? No, I suppose it doesn't. Aragorn shook his head. Of course it doesn't. Forgive me. I thought that you would know already. Did you not come through Rivendell? Surely Elrond would have said. He knows. Or guesses. Arwen certainly knows. My blackbird has been telling her tales. I'd imagine he has. It's what he's known for. Well, among other things. Aragorn sighed and put his hand on Halbarad's knee. You're right, of course. I had heard that he was gone, south on an errand that no one could speak more of. Arwen said that perhaps I should wait for you to tell me more. I imagine you now know why. Halbarad imagined that she had meant it as a kindness. Had thought that he would want to tell his friend in his own way, but he wished that she had not left it up to him. It was too much, all at once, and he would weep if he did not watch himself. Listen to me now. Maklar is gone. Yes, and I do not know where, but I think he is in need. I think that he calls to me. I've had the dreams. Aragorn frowned at that. He knew some of what Halbarad saw, not the details. Halbarad knew better than to burden him with that, but he knew enough to believe him. Why now, if he lives? Why not sooner? Why would Elrond not have known? I do not know, said Halbarad. I cannot know until I find him, but I think he was somewhere I could not reach him, nor he me. He slumped over, face in his hands. I must go. Yes, said Aragorn, putting his arm around Halbarad's shoulder and tugging him close. I think you must. I'm sorry that I wasn't here, that you've had to wait. Go to Rivendell first, though. I'm certain that you will help of Elrond. Halbarad snorted. I think I will not give him a choice. I have things to say to him. You're braver than I, Aragorn said, voice dry. Wait until the morning, though. I never thought to find you, of all people, drunk on duty. I'm not on duty anymore, murmured Halbarad into his hands. You're back. You did not know that, said Aragorn. Or maybe you did. I should not discount your sight, I think. In any case, I can only say that I'm back for now. I think that things are beginning to change. So go, Halbarad. Find your stray and bring him back to us. I shall soon need all the friends I can find. Oh well, said Halbarad with a yawn. His feelings had been riding him too hard for too long, and he was weary, washed out. We will be at your side when your time comes. I've seen it. Have you? Said Aragorn. That comforts me, old friend. They sat like that for a moment. Then Aragorn laughed, a little huffing chuckle. What? Forgive me, it's just Maklar? Really? I could not think of a more unlikely pair if I tried. Hush, don't mock me. I love him. I see that. Aragorn squeezed his shoulder. Come, let's find somewhere to sleep. I'll see you on your way. The journey to Rivendell was something of a blur to Halbarad. Spring was erupting beneath his feet even as he walked, but he almost could not see it, so intent upon his goal. Every day seemed to stretch out behind him as an interminable gulf of time wasted, flowing into a whole year past in which he had done nothing, believing the gentle words that had, lying, told him that there was nothing to be done. Halbarad had words, many of them, that he wished to say to Elrond, but they fled his throat when he came into the valley, for he was greeted by Elrond half-elven himself, jogging up unshod up the path to meet him, looking positively dishevelled. A little flock of elves trailed behind him, fluttering with ineffectual worry. "You have seen us, haven't you?" he shouted, a faint light in his eyes that reminded Halbarad strangely of Maklar. "He lives!" "I know," said Halbarad. "How did you not?" "I have no idea," Elrond grinned and shook his head. "There was darkness between us, and I could not reach him. But it is lifted now, Dunedain, and there is no time to waste. Already we may be too late, but we waited for you. Arwen said you would come, and she is only rarely wrong." "Elrond, my lord," Halbarad corrected himself at a sharp look from one of Elrond's household. "What have you seen?" "Seen? Nothing at all," Elrond exclaimed. "Heard, though. I have heard such a song, Halbarad, a song to burn the darkness to ash, if only it does not take the singer with it." He swayed where he stood, and the sharp-eyed counsellor took his elbow. Elrond tucked it back and waved him away. "Later, Erestor. Come, Halbarad." Elrond hurried him down the path, all but dancing with excitement. Halbarad followed, still mystified. He caught a whiff of horses, and soon found himself in a courtyard beside a well-appointed stable. "Eagles would be the traditional conveyance for such an errand, but I'm afraid you'll have to make do with horses. Those I can provide, at least." "I still say you should take Asfaloth," said another of Elrond's household from the shade of the stables. He stepped into the sun, and his hair flamed gold, bright enough to dazzle Halbarad's eyes. "So it is you, is it?" he asked, giving Halbarad a swift glance that seemed to see too much. "Brave soul," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "To be clear, he means your choice of lover, not your errand," commented Erestor, "although I'm certain that is also admirable." "Ignore them, Halbarad," said Arwen, leading a tall chestnut mare from the stable. "I see you've met Erestor. This is Glorfindel of Gondolin." Halbarad had no more capacity for surprise, or that revelation might have made a greater impression. "I'm sorry, what are we doing?" "We are rescuing the son of Fëanor from whatever disaster he has brought upon himself this time," said Glorfindel. "A courageous endeavor, even if it's one of you will likely have to repeat in another century or so. You say haste is needed, and no horse will serve better than Asfaloth." "Thank you, Glorfindel, but Asfaloth, well, he's not exactly discreet, is he?" said Elrond. "The bells come off, you know," said Glorfindel, his voice dry. "But yes, I suppose he does stand out." He turned his bright eyes back to Halbarad. "You can ride, can't you? I know how much you rangers love to tramp about the wilds." "You can ride tolerably." That was Elladan, emerging from the shadows, leading his tall dappled stallion, not exactly discreet, himself. Arwen passed the reins of the mare to Halbarad. "Here, this is Fundariel, my father's horse. I think you will get along well, and she will be happy for an adventure." "Thank you, lady," he said, starting to feel like, at last, he understood what was happening. Elrohir was behind her, with his own mount. "Are you ready, then? Should we not give poor Halbarad a chance to catch his breath?" "No," said Halbarad. "I am ready." "I thought as much," said Elrond. I wish I might go with you. Travel well, my sons," he said, embracing the brothers as Halbarad stood, uncertain, to decide. He busied himself with adjusting the stirrups and stowing some of his things in the saddlebags, already well stocked for a long journey. He was just making Fundariel's acquaintance, patting her shoulder while she nosed at his hand, when Elrond came to stand before him, his hands out. "Thank you, Dunedain," he said, clasping Halbarad's elbows. "It seems to me that this is my error that you work to repair. I think now, perhaps, that it was my poor welcome that drove Maklar to whatever has held him from you for all this time, and my blindness has kept us from seeking him sooner. I ask your pardon." He lowered his head. Halbarad had no idea what to say when confronted with a confession so near to the blame that he had already laid, on himself, on Elrond. "That may be," he finally said, as gently as he could. "But if so, it is not my pardon that we must beg. I hold a share in that blame, after all." "I think you're being too kind to an old fool," said Elrond, but he pulled Halbarad into an embrace. "Bring him back to us." "I will," said Halbarad. "I swear it." Elrond winced. "Let's stifle that impulse, I think," said Elrond, with a small smile. "Good travels, and good fortune." End of chapter 19. Stay tuned.